Hi. Welcome to day 19. Today we'll be talking about meaning and how you can use meaning to help really finish off what we're doing in this program. But let's start with a little bit of a recap. We've gone through an awful lot of information in the past 19 days. We started with day 1, setting yourself up for success. Day 2, we continued setting yourself up for success, and we learned EFT. Hopefully you're still practicing your EFT occasionally to help you make changes. Here's a little tip I've learned. If you want to memorize something and you're trying to help your memory, if you do EFT right before you study the memorization process, it increases your memory. So this is kind of fun, so you can use it in a lot. On day 3, we talked about integration, stopping the inner war. Day 4, we talked about triggers, what sets you off. You know, we call them anchors or triggers that get you to go and relapse. Then on day 5, we talked about stress, why stress can kill us all, but why we have to manage our stress, especially as people with addictions. And we also talked about HALT, don't get too hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, because that builds it. Day 6, we talked about one of my favorite things, logical levels. And you looked at what level of your life do you have to change? Your environment, your behavior, your skills, your beliefs, your identity, or your spirituality. This is an insight very few people get, because if you change something at one level, everything changes. That's why sometimes when you move to a new house, you can change who you are. And then we talked about beliefs, the why do you do what you do. Then on day 8, we talked about reinventing yourself, creating a new you. And we're much farther into the process. And then we kind of got into some fun stuff we talked about fear. We spent a whole day on fear. Why do we talk about fear? Fear drives a lot of addicts and alcoholics back to the addiction. Then we talked about taking care of your physical body. You know, if you take care of your physical body, things go much easier. Then we talked about the spirit, your spiritual self, and that we are a spiritual being having a physical experience, and that's to be enjoyed. Then we talked about the mind on day 12 and how it ties everything together. Then on day 13, we talked about confidence. On day 14, we talked about steel resolve. And on day 15, 16, 17, and 18, we gave an insight into the 12-step program that very few people ever have received, and it's based on the old way it was done, and it was called the Back to Basics movement. How did AA work so well in the 40s, 50s, and 60s and start to slide down in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and onward? Well, we go back to what worked and brought it into today, and you already have much more insight into how it works. And so today we talk about meaning, and it's basically about reacting to life. How to react to life on life's terms, right? Because it's about, the only way to describe it is most people go through life reacting today on things that happened in the past. So if you're in a new situation, how do you know how to react if something happens? Well, you don't. So most people go back in their past and look for something close to it and react that way. A good example would be someone's at a store and they're trying to get it, they're talking about a problem, and they're at the customer service counter and they're talking about it, and the person says, well, our rules are, and they start to explain whatever the rules are. Well, this person, maybe this hasn't happened to them. They go back, the last time this happened to me, these people screwed me, in my opinion, and they escalate into rage, which really serves nothing. So you're reacting to the current event based on past experiences. But how can you learn to act without reacting? How can you learn to see things differently? That's why we talk about how to do this. So now we're going to watch a video, and it's on rituals.
I teach people that daily you have to prime yourself. You have to do something for 10 minutes minimum. If you don't have 10 minutes, you don't have a life. And
ooh, that's so good.
I mean, you gotta do it, right?
That's good. If you don't have 10 minutes,
you don't have a life
to give to priming yourself.
That's right.
You
and
don't
if
have
you
a
want a prime life, you want a beautiful life, you want a beautiful family.
Oh, I love that you say that.
But I do this first time I wake up in the morning.
Yeah.
People always ask me, how are you so up all the time? But part of it is I attend all these seminars.
Yes.
I teach all this. But the real reason is
you prime yourself.
I prime myself. That's what I've done for years. It's like I change my body with this radical breathing pattern or movement. There's many ways to do it. But then I do 10 minutes, and it usually goes more because I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
But 10 minutes is how I get myself to do it. 3.5 minutes of pure gratitude about 3 things. And I pick one of those 3 to be simple, because I don't want to be the astronaut that, he went to the moon, that was his idea of adventure, and then they all come back and were depressed because what do I do for the rest of my life?
Yes.
So the wind in my face, my children's faces, anything. And the reason for gratitude is the two emotions that mess us up the most are fear and anger.
Yeah.
And you can't be grateful and fearful simultaneously. They don't go together. And you can't be angry and grateful simultaneously. So if you literally start your day cultivating that, this is the part I was talking about, creating a highway to happiness.
Yeah.
And then I do 3 minutes of my 3 to thrive. What are 3 outcomes and results I'm really committed to, and I see them as done and fulfilled. And in 10
For
minutes,
that day?
I usually look at something at 6 months to 12 months out.
Wow.
Something that's a little
Okay.
bigger. And then what I feel is fulfilled and done, and I give thanks for it. And you're at the end of those 10 minutes, and usually it's 15 or 18 for me, I am so wired. Now, I've done that for years. It's been the base of me. What's different with suffering is measuring it moment to moment, Oprah. And then the third one for me is, okay, how do I love more? Because love to me is an action. It's not a word. It's not an emotion. It's like, if you love, you act accordingly. So love, and what can I do in a loving way, and that what can I be grateful for? And that little 3-step process ends the suffering.
Good. So what are some of your rituals? What are the things that you do? When you look at people, you can tell what their rituals are sometimes. If somebody's in great shape, you can bet that that person's ritual, one of their rituals has to do with exercise. They lift weights, they run, they do something physical. They watch what they eat. And the same, if you see someone that's, let's just say, grossly overweight and can't get it under control, they have different rituals. So what are your rituals? And how can you use rituals to your advantage? How can you create a new ritual? Because human beings like rituals. Rituals are comforting to us. Just like how you get in a car, most people go through a certain ritual, whether it's put the key in if it's an older car, or hit the start button, and then you buckle your seatbelt. Or do you buckle your seatbelt and then you hit start? Everybody has a different ritual, and that's fine. But once you know what your ritual is, when you're starting something new, develop a new ritual. One of the things we've done for the past 19 days is hopefully started you on a ritual of thinking about being grateful every day. Thinking about how you can change your life for the positive. So what is your ritual? And this helps you get a new start. And the one way to think about that is meaning. Any meaning is only meaning to you. In other words, nothing is neither good nor bad except how you place it, right? If you just look at it. So a good example would be when someone has a birthday. Is it a special day or is it another day? We all have friends that their birthday's huge. They want to have a party. They think about it for weeks. It's a big deal. And we probably have other friends that it's just another day. Well, it's the same experience, the day that they were born, right, in a chronological sense, but it's how they place meaning on it. So what meaning you put on a situation means everything. Another example would be when you walk in and if you got a certain look from your significant other and you put certain meaning on, oh my God, they're mad, or something's going on, and then you react to it, whether it's true or not is irrelevant. It's the meaning you place on the situation. So you don't realize you have the control on how you choose what that meaning is. And one of the interesting things, like, what is your sobriety date? When was the last time you drank or used? Could that be your new birth date? Many people in recovery, their sobriety date is more important to them than their birth date. And I talk to a lot of people and they say, because, my birth date was random. It's just the day I slid out and hit the world. But my sobriety date, I have control over. And so, do you want to celebrate? Do you want to do this? Because again, all of your meanings are based on beliefs, values, attitudes, training, and experience. I would look at a situation much differently than someone with no training and experience. Let's say if someone says they want to make a change, I'm looking at it through years of psychology, neurolinguistics, hypnosis. I'm looking at it different than someone else. So what are your meanings you place on situations? A few days ago, we talked about staining. We talked about how you can, let's say, have a really good day and then one thing go wrong and you end up staining the whole day. What happens when that happens, to give you some more insight, is then you go back and you rewrite all those memories that happened that were pleasant or neutral all day or all weekend. You rewrite them negatively. And we see this all the time. And guess what? If you're in recovery, you've already done this. And usually it's for the negative. You went in and placed different meaning on whenever a negative thing happened about your addiction, right? A good example would be a guy used to talk about, every time I got a DUI, I would think it was the police's fault. They were following me. They set me up. There was a roadblock. Well, that was the meaning he placed on it. After he got sober and he began to learn all this, he looked at it like, if I wasn't drunk, I wouldn't have got a DUI. Whether the police pulled me over or not, whether I hit a sobriety checkpoint or not, would be irrelevant. He placed more meaning on his own responsibility in the situation. So what meaning do you place on anything? And one of the most important is, what meaning do you have in recovery? Because how you act or react in a situation is based on the meanings you give it. If you think it's positive, you'll react positively. If you think it's negative, you'll react negatively. We all do this. We all do this. And then you'll get different responses based on the meanings you're doing, because it's going to get you to respond in a certain way. And it depends, do you want to be successful or not? That's what it boils down to. And again, meaning can be powerful. I always tell the prison story of a guy I was talking to. He was in his late 40s, and he'd been in prison since his early 20s. And what had happened, he'd gotten a short prison sentence, whatever it was, 5 to 7 years. And while he was in prison, he committed a murder in prison. And when I was talking to him, this happened, of course, when he was in his early 20s. And he goes, Doc, it was kind of weird. At the time, he was a member of a gang. And he goes, there was some things going on in the prison, some fights and that. And someone disrespected the gang. And he goes, the meaning I placed on it was so powerful. It escalated to a fight, and I took another man's life. And I have to live with that for the rest of my life. Now, where I'm at now, he said, I look back on that, and I couldn't believe I placed such meaning on it, that I'm going to possibly spend the rest of my life in prison over that experience. So the meaning you place can be everything. What's important to you? And again, the meaning is under your control, because hindsight's always 20/20. My friend that served that time in prison, and he did get out, and he's in recovery, and he's doing a lot of interesting things. He's one I always say, hindsight's 20/20. If he would have known then what he knew now, he wouldn't have committed the crime while he was in prison. It wouldn't have been that important, because the meaning would have drained away. So have you ever found yourself placing a wrong meaning on something and then escalating it either negative or positive? And again, those of us in recovery, we look back on our addiction and say, well, it wasn't that bad. We're placing a different meaning on it. Or, it was always my boss's fault, or the police's fault, or the court's fault, or the school's fault. It was never my fault. You're placing a different meaning. So we want to begin to take charge of this so we can really change. So now we're going to watch another video, and this is on values, emotions, and meaning. So enjoy.
Here's what values are. Values are the emotional states that we believe are most important for us to either experience or avoid. So values are the emotional states that we believe are most important for us to either experience or avoid. Let me show you what I mean. What you value determines what you focus on. If your number one value in life is security, I guarantee you know where every exit is in this building. You looked around and checked it out. If your number one value in life is adventure, you don't even know how you got here. It literally is it controls what you notice or don't notice, what you do or don't do, what's important or not important. Every decision in your life is controlled by your beliefs and values. Many years ago, I was asked a very interesting question. Somebody asked me a question, they raised their hand in a seminar and said, Tony, can you change people that don't want to change? Of course you can change people who don't want to change. All you need is the right kind of. If you have enough leverage where change becomes an absolute. Now for some people, leverage is not even the threat of their own life. Some people would rather die than have you tell them what to do. And so that's not the leverage. The leverage for them might be something for their children. Leverage for them might be spiritual growth. All of us have a leverage point. If you find the leverage, not the leverage you make someone do it, the leverage that will make them make themselves do it. We all have some place that'll get us to follow through.
Now, if you get enough leverage and if you interrupt the pattern enough, how many of you ever had a pattern when you were a kid and you had like some obnoxious uncle or something and you were trying to be upset and they'd come like rub your damn head or something that should make you crazy and you couldn't stay upset because they kept doing this to you? How many had this happen? Say aye. If you have enough leverage and you break someone's pattern enough times, a new pattern will show up. If you're conscious, you can create the new pattern. So the answer is yes. Now then the question would be, Tony, if all it takes is leverage, then why don't most people change? And I had a lot of answers for that, but that night, I'm a night person. That night, I'm wired up after a seminar. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. It was December. And so I flip on the television in the back for some white noise, looking for CNN, and I come across the old Christmas classic, this Christmas Carol, right? A Dickens classic. And I see it in black and white, and I start watching the movie, and I'm remembering it from being a kid. And as I'm watching this thing, I see this man named Scrooge who clearly doesn't want to change. In fact, he's certain he doesn't need to change because what's happened is his life went through a lot of pain. And when he got pain, he looked for the source of that pain, and he said it was being close to people. So he decided his people equals pain. Remember the red squares we talked about? So now he wants to avoid people, and he's mean to people. Now, he's also very wealthy financially. He makes up this belief that because I'm mean and tough with people, I'm rich. The truth is, he's financially rich. If you watch the movie, you read the story, when everybody else is gone, who's still working? He is. He's hardworking, he's thrifty, he's smart, he's intelligent, but he thinks he's rich because he's mean. So he doesn't want to lose being rich. He doesn't want to lose not being hurt. So he has a belief. Be mean to people and everything works out, even though he's miserable. Can we have beliefs that make no sense and yet still believe them, yes or no? Sure, we just get wired. So I'm watching this guy. Now, the only way people change is if they associate either enough what? Pain, so they have to change, or they associate changing will equal enough what? And ideally, if you get both, you'll change. If you get, every moment I do this, the pain's getting more and more intense, there's a point where you must change. And if I change, I get all this pleasure, you're going to want to change. How many follow? But what equals pain and what equals pleasure is what you associate in your nervous system. So what happens is, the only way you create change is changing what you link pain and what you link pleasure to in your nervous system, not just in your head, in your gut. That's what controls you. Lots of times in your head, you know what you should do, but your gut takes over. Your fear, or your greed, or your desire, or your comfort, or whatever. Who knows what I'm talking about here? Say aye. But watch this. How many of you used to have a favorite dessert, or a food, or a form of alcohol that you really, really, really loved? And then one night you had an experience like never before, where something happened, where this food or this drink or this alcohol that you love so much, it went down, but it kept coming back up at a level of intensity and with enough aroma and pain and association that to this day, it takes no willpower just to think of that alcohol or think of the smell of that food or look at it makes you appalled, makes you repelled. Who's had an experience like this in your life? Say aye. Tell me what that change was. Was that a change in willpower? No. All that happened is your brain changed what it used to link pleasure to, it now linked pain to. When you link enough pain, it takes no willpower, you're going to avoid it. The problem is some of you are linking pain to things you need, like exercise, right? Or pain what you need, like a relationship, right? And it's the wrong association, but it's going to control your life. Your job is to change what you link pain and pleasure to. So that night, what was pleasure became pain, and now it takes no willpower, you just avoid it. So we call that changing what you associate to things in your nervous system, or for short, a neuroassociative change. In other words, changing in your nervous system, what you associate pain and pleasure to. So, by the way, in this Christmas Carol story, does this man Scrooge change his life, yes or no? He didn't want to change. Does he change his life a little or completely? And by the way, how fast? In a heartbeat, in one evening. How does it happen? 3 neuroassociative conditioning specialists show up at his house. Right? 3 ghosts show up, and what do? They get him to link a massive, unbearable amount of what? To all the things he did in the past around people. Then they go to everything he has in the present pain, and everything in the future pain, till there's so much, there was nowhere to escape. Here's the other reason why people don't change. Because right now, my relationship's in pain. But it was good in the past. So you escape having to change by remembering a good time. Or I might be coughing and having these problems with cigarettes right now, but you know what? George Burns lived to be 102. He smoked cigars, by the way, and he's 1 out of 10 billion people that pulled that off. But let's not confuse ourselves with ratios. So you make up what the future is. If your present is painful, you can escape to the past and get out of the pressure to change. How many follow this? Say I. Or you can escape to a future because no one knows what it is for sure and you can make it up. But if your brain links, it's been painful in the what? Past, in the, and it's even worse in the, you'll change like that. Who here has ever stayed in a relationship that you knew was not right for you? It wasn't right for you, it wasn't right for them. Who has ever stayed in a relationship way too long? Who's done this before? Raise your hand, say I. It wasn't good for you, it wasn't good for them, yet you stayed. Why? Why? Because even though it's painful in the present, what'd you do? You said, it'll get better over there in the future. Who finally changed? Who here finally changed that? Say I. How'd you do it? Your brain went, it's painful now, it was painful in the past, it's gonna be worse in the future, that's it. That's what I call a Dickens pattern. When you lock in pain in all those places, there's no place to escape, so you change. It's like if you put a wall here, and a wall here, and we close them in on you, amazingly, you'll move forward. That's what we're talking about, giving yourself leverage on yourself that way, not having someone else do it to you, you do it to yourself. That's when you got the power again. How many get it? Say I.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that. So it's really, what do you place on these things? What values, what emotion, what meanings? Because that's what drives your life. And we want to begin to develop future sight. So can we take hindsight, when we say hindsight's 20/20, can we place that in the future? Well, one of the things you notice is as people mature, they develop a better future sight. Well, what it is, they have a vast repertoire of experiences in the past that they can draw on when they're looking in the future. But if you could take that future perspective into current situations, in other words, if you think, how will I feel about this decision or this action I'm doing right now, a year from now, 2 years from now, will it even be important? You might go, no, it's not that big a deal. And you can let it go. Where at the time it may seem like huge, but if you can imagine a few months from now, a few years from now, looking back on it, you know, it changes everything. So what you want to do is to develop future sight. And whenever you meet someone young that we say they're mature beyond their years, they just have this ability to step out of the situation and judge it differently than other people. And that's what future sight is. Yeah? And one of the things we can do is see addiction for what it is. It's destructive, it's painful, it's misery. And then when you're presented with drinking or drugging or using again, you think it through. One of the things in the 12-step world they always say is, you know, think the drink through or think the drug through. What does that mean? Well, it means pull out of the situation and think, well, what happened the last time I used? If I use today, my future will be just like my past. So it pulls you out of the situation of maybe craving right now, because again, you think about last time I used, I got in a fight with my wife, I'm almost fired, police are chasing me. If I use today, well, my future is going to be just like my past. And so it's called thinking the drink through. That's a mature attitude for an addict or an alcoholic. Many people take years to develop it. You can develop it now because you understand the process. And it's just pull back from the situation and think it through. And it's all about training your brain. And one way to do that is if you think of a neutral event. And how do you feel when you're neutral to something? Easiest way to imagine this is, have you ever been in a situation, one of your friends gets angry over something, and you're like, what's the big deal? You're neutral toward it. This person's very vested and their emotions are strong, so they're escalating into anger. You're neutral. Well, if you think about that, what if you are able to take this neutral feeling And whenever you're experiencing something, especially something new, you start with being neutral before you place value on it, before you place meaning on it. Unfortunately, again, what happens for most of us, situations happening, and we place an old meaning, an old value on it right now, and we're off to wherever that situation is. Could be negative, like anger. It could be you're too quick to say yes to certain situations. So we want to look at it differently. So we want to take that neutral feeling before you emotion an event. And that's almost like a Zen-like state. If you've studied Buddhism or you look at it, it's like you're almost neutral to the world, and you could stay there, but before you emotion it, and I like emotion, but before I emotion it, if you start with the neutral state, it's much more powerful, because that is the number one driver. And then with that, we want to remove any negative charge as soon as it happens. We want to pull back from the negative, let it go, because resentment is letting the negative grow through time. Someone says something today, instead of letting it go or processing it out or doing what you need to do, you think about it again and again and again, and a week later, you're enraged over something that person may or may not even remember that they did. Because again, what you feed grows, what you starve dies. If you don't feed this anger, this resentment, it will die. But if you keep feeding it every day, and then every time you rewrite it, you probably make it bigger and more colorful. We don't want to do that. We want to remove it. And again, there's something powerful about when something happens that upsets you, you just admit, this upsets me. And then you can move on. So it's all about focus, and one way to do it is to develop a body sense. So when these experiences are happening, where do you feel it in your body? And then you begin to realize, when something's negative, I feel it right here or right here. And when something's positive, my head seems to go open, whatever it is. Once you develop that body sense, then you can begin to channel all these wonderful things that we're talking about. And if you're trusting and open-minded and have a loving attitude, you can have much more fun. So now we're going to do a relaxation. So take a nice deep breath and relax.